Everyone.
Good evening.
We are doing week 92 of the Life of Christ. Been off for a few weeks simply because weather, and then last week I was under the weather, and there was no way I could do both Bible engagement and preach too. And we postponed it last week. I know that many of you are glad the snow is over with. Some of you are standing in the middle of Kroger recently hollering, "Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." I won't mention Terry's name.
You should have called me. I was on it with you, Terry.
I didn't have your number.
Angel's got their number. Angel's got everybody's number. Nobody gives you their number, but Angel, they give it to you.
I got Dave's. I got Everett's. That's it.
Oh,
They got Larry's too.
you got mine too, I know.
He keeps hollering, let it snow, I'm gonna change my number.
Oh, so
Want more?
we are here this morning, picking up where we left off. We are, at this point, we've covered the crucifixion of Christ. We have talked a little bit about, we talked about his death. We touched base on his burial. We kind of went on a side note the last time, just to kind of talk about a few things about, understanding who Jesus, whether they understood who Jesus really was, whether we really understand who Jesus is. I think we do, but I think we can gain a much greater understanding of who he is. There's a lot to the Word of God that is very important for our spiritual lives. And just as a side note, I was in Walmart yesterday, and they had this section that's got Christian books and things of that nature. And I looked at a Bible study. They had just the cover. I saw the cover, and it said Bible studies through the entire Bible. It was a Bible study through the entire Bible and how it applies to you. And I thought, that's noble because, we need to know how the Bible applies to us. But as I've said before, so often we try to make it fit what we want it to fit. And let me tell you, we limit God so many ways when we try to make God fit what we want him to fit, make the word fit what we want it to fit. You okay? All right. So we've got to get into the Word and look at it differently. And when we've studied Christ, we've kind of academically to a degree, but we've also tried to apply spiritual principles to our lives during this time period. So it's kind of been a two-way street on that. But that's the thing. The Word is about challenging our lives, changing us. And Jesus came and died for us for that very reason, so that we can be challenged and changed, and so that we can be right in the sight of God. We're going to be in John chapter 19 this morning. I'm going to pick up where we were a couple of weeks back on our study, one of the last two times that we were together. We are now talking about his burial, and we'll get in, and we're going into his resurrection, but we're not going to get the resurrection today. We're going to talk about the burial, a little bit of it in depth, to some depth. John chapter 19, just so you know, the other places we will be are Luke 23 and Matthew 27 and 28. So if you want to kind of keep yourself ready to turn to those places, that's fine. But John chapter 19 says, verse 38, Jesus has passed at this point. He is on the cross, still hanging on the cross. the Romans are in no hurry to get him off there. They could care less. In fact, a lot of times they would leave people there just as a spectacle. But we're seeing, there's some respect that's being paid to him by his followers at this point. Verse 38 begins, and I've read this a couple lessons back, but I want to touch it again today. It says, but later Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away, and he was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices in strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Now, I'm going to touch base on a few things that are not mentioned here in John just for a moment to just kind of put this in perspective. First of all, and we'll mention it again, Joseph of Arimathea was actually part of the Sanhedrin. He was a rich man. The tomb that he put Jesus in actually belonged to him. Although he was part of the Sanhedrin, he did not vote to have Jesus crucified. He was not part of that group, in agreement with that group. Joseph of Arimathea actually was a follower of Christ. And actually we see two from the Sanhedrin here that are followers of Christ that take Jesus and prepare him for burial. And that is Nicodemus. And we all know who Nicodemus was. Nicodemus was in John chapter 3, where the famous verse that everybody can quote, and you see it at every ball game, John 3:16, for God so loved whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And it was Nicodemus that asked the question, what must I do to be born again? Or Jesus tells him, you must be born again to be saved. I think us as Christians, we've preached that and taught that, and believed that, but do we really understand that? We're not going to get into that today, by the way. So we see here that Joseph had some pull. He could get to Pilate because of his position, and he goes to Pilate and asks Pilate for permission to take Jesus off the cross. Now, Jesus has already breathed his last breath. He said, it is finished, breathed his last breath. They came to break his legs. They didn't have to because Jesus was already dead. And Joseph of Arimathea, a disciple of Jesus, part of the Sanhedrin, asked Pilate permission to take the body of Jesus. So he and Nicodemus both come, and they take Jesus' body down. Both of which, being religious leaders, both of them being a part of the group that actually wanted Jesus crucified. And this was dangerous ground, really, because they're in dissension of the group which they belong. They don't want them associating with Jesus. So we see here that Nicodemus also brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, spices, perfumes. He brought all part of the burial ritual of a person who has passed. They took his body down. They wrapped it with the spices and strips of linen according to Jewish burial customs. Then they laid his body in an unused tomb nearby. We learn in Matthew 27 that this tomb actually belongs to Joseph of Arimathea. And they did all this in a hurry. They didn't have a whole lot of time. The day of preparation, everything had to be, they had a lot to do, and they had very short time to get to do it. I almost did a Smokey and the Bandit. A long way to go and a short time to get there. Yeah, it's a great day when I can put a Smokey. And nobody call me that little guy with the cowboy hat. That's off limits. Little Enos is off limits. You want to call me Flash, I'll be okay with that. Don't call me Little Enos. So anyway, here we are. They don't have a whole lot of time. They did it in a hurry. And when Nicodemus brought the spices, the perfumes, you know, this is how I picture it. In my mind, I'm picturing he's got a little jar, a couple bottles, you know, probably a little box he's carrying it in. Oh, here we go. And he'd been down to Kroger, you know, got his Kroger pickup, or up to Walmart and got his Walmart pickup, and he called Dave because Dave's the king of the pickup. Just ask Allison. Anytime she needs it picked up, she sends Dave. I was talking to him Friday. Well, I got to find out what else I got to do. I guess I got to go do a grocery pickup, and I got to rent me a U-Haul, and I got my. But anyway, the adventures of the mind of Dave. And so anyway, you know, I'm picturing, you know, a grocery bag, you know, a box, something like that. No. It says it was 75 pounds. That's a lot of weight. Anybody ever pick up a 50-pound bag of feed or 80-pound concrete, 80-pound bag of concrete?
That looks like I'm gonna do that.
Well,
I picked up an 8-pound bag of cat roofing.
okay.
I
They're
think
not.
they're 80-pound kid though, so.
So, I mean, you know, you got the idea, regardless. And my dad was a roofer. I don't know how much a bundle of shingles weighs. They don't weigh as much to me now as they did. Well, I don't know. They might now. As an adult, they don't weigh as much as they did when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I used to break the bundle down and carry them about 3 stacks up to get one bundle up the ladder, which Dad would make fun of me for that. And then, of course, he would use the shingles up before I got them done. Got the next ones up there and be hollering, "Where's my shingles? Where's my shingles?" But it almost reminds me of that cartoon where it's Hoss and Pfeffer. Where's my Hoss and Pfeffer? But anyway, all right, this. I know you're too old. You're too young for that one. It's a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Okay. So anyway, Dad was that, you know, they were heavy. So these guys they were carrying a load. They had a body. They had to take care of all this, and they had a very short time period to do it. Interesting enough, though, 75 pounds of spices and perfumes was what was used for a king. So Nicodemus didn't spare any expense here. He was actually showing major respect to Jesus at this point.
So they used every bit of the perfume and myrrh?
The spices and the perfumes, yeah. I'd say they probably did because I mean, sure, I guess, you know, you plan for overage just in case you need something, but they're covering an entire body. They've got to get it all wrapped, you know, all of that. And, you know, I mean, Harley, they would have had to bring 150 pounds. I mean, you know, just think about it for you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't know how much it was. Something that was their custom. But it was the amount that they used was the amount for a king. And he wasn't honored as a king in life. He wasn't honored as a king at birth, only by the three kings, the three wise men. But at death, we find Joseph and Nicodemus are honoring him as king. Let's go to Luke 23 for a moment. Luke 23, verses 50 to 56. Luke 23, verse 50 says, "Now there was a man named Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man, who had not consented to their decision and action." Remember, I told you he was part of the council, but he didn't agree with the council. This is where this comes from. He came from the Judean town of Arimathea, and he himself was waiting for the kingdom of God. So he was a Jew who was part of the religious sect who was actually looking for Jesus the Messiah. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and then he took it down, wrapped it in linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb cut in a rock, one in which no one had been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph, saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. So we see here that Joseph, being Sanhedrin and a member of the council, he wasn't part of the decision and action, but he was indeed a follower of Christ. We also see that the women who had followed Jesus witnessed his burial. So it wasn't a matter of Joseph and Nicodemus did something odd or strange to try to hide his body so that they could claim that he resurrected from the dead. There were witnesses that he was actually buried. Now let's go to Matthew chapter 27, verses 59 to 66. Now we're reading this again. We're reading this account, this time in Matthew. Matthew 27, verse 59. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and placed it in its own new tomb, in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb, and the next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise the disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first." "Take a guard," Pilate answered. "Go make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. As I was reading this just now, I didn't take note of it while I was putting my notes together, but it just happened to dawn on me. One of the big controversies they had with Jesus was him breaking the Sabbath. Things like walking through a field and eating out of the field on the way, the healing on the Sabbath day. Throughout his ministry, they gave him grief about doing things on the Sabbath whenever the Sabbath was supposed to be a day of rest. But Buddy, the chief priest, and the elders didn't have a problem with, on the Sabbath, making a trek to Pilate and saying, "Hey, we got to do something about this." How contradictory they were, hypocritical, if you will. So Joseph and Nicodemus, after they laid Jesus in the tomb, they rolled a big stone in front of the entrance and left. I mean, that's not an unusual occurrence. That's something that they would do. If you go back to when Lazarus was raised from the dead, they had to roll a stone away before Jesus called him forth. Again, we see here Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were witnesses to all of this. They saw them prepare the body. They saw them put him in the tomb. They saw them roll the stone. These stones weren't light stones. These were heavy stones. It took a couple of guys to actually do this. There's a possibility that there might have been somebody else there with them to help them roll that stone. We don't know. All we know is from the account, Joseph and Nicodemus are mentioned. But there's controversy now. Well, of course, everywhere you go, there's controversy. You know, the preacher can't look at you funny with that there being a controversy. I mean, that's the way it is in life. And that's why, you know, I don't have feelings. Now you just look at me and I just like, no. But in reality, you know, there's always controversy. Somebody's not going to like something you do. Somebody's not going to like the way you're dressed. Somebody's not going to like the perfume you wear. Somebody's not going to like the amount of times a week you take a bath. Somebody's not going to like the kind of food you eat. That's just part of life. And you can't be a people pleaser, and Jesus obviously wasn't throughout his ministry. And now there's a controversy because he wasn't a people pleaser. He was there to preach the truth. The chief priests, the Pharisees, they go to Pilate, they petition Pilate. We remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver, talk about Jesus, he said, after 3 days, I'll rise again. Now, you know, that would bother me, I guess, if I were in their shoes, because, you know, the last thing they need is for Jesus to rise again. The very last thing they need is to give some validity to this possibility. Because if Jesus rises again, can you imagine the impact it can have on them and their ministry? Because they honestly, that's one reason why they wanted Jesus in the first place to be gone, was because he was a threat to their positions and ministry. Their self-righteousness too, by the way. So they're like, you know, he said after 3 days he'll rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. And it's obvious that when you read this in detail, you get to notice, and there's probably not a great way to secure a tomb. You know, today we would probably get some welders out there and throw some, get some metal and weld it up, and, you know, put some bolts in there and tighten it down and put a lock on it, you know, or something of that nature. That's what we would do today. To do something like that, though, takes time. You can't weld in 15 minutes a big cage that's going to hold a rock in place and keep people from rolling it. So they're concerned. They want him to give an order, and Pilate knows that this thing can't happen real simply. Their concern is that his disciples may come and steal the body, and that the people he had would think that he's been raised from the dead. And then they also say this last deception of him possibly raising from the dead would be worse than the first. Everything he did in the ministry walking on this earth pales in comparison to the claim that he's rose from the dead. Why? Because if one, he didn't raise from the dead and they tried to make it look that way, it would give validity to his preaching. A false validity, had they faked it. But if he really did raise from the dead, well, gives validity to what he was preaching. They don't know that. They remembered he said he would raise again from the dead 3 days. They're concerned something might happen for the disciples to take advantage of his promise, which would be worse than the first. So Pilate orders the guards to go, commands that the tomb be secured as best as they could, which tells us there was no simple way of doing this. I can see right now the wheels turning in Everett's brain, though. Well, let me see. If I had about 22 by 6s and about 22 by 4s, and give me about 4 by 4s.
They just didn't have duct tape and drywall screws back then.
I'll build them something they can't get in, let me tell you. So he orders them. So this is what they do. They go put a seal on the tomb. You ever get something and, it's got a sticker on the case, and if you unscrew the case and take it apart, it'll say void. Well, you've probably never done that. I mean, Dave's a stickler for the rules. He sees a sticker. I'm not allowed to take the screw out. If I take the screw out, I void the warranty. I'm not doing that. It's a whole rabbit hole for him. The rest of us are being like, wonder if I can get that piece of tape off there without it showing void. I've done it. Yeah, I've done it. But, they put a way to notice if this stone's been moved. And then they post a guard. What else are they going to do? So Matthew 28, verses 1 to 4, and I'm going to close with this. It says, after the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. And the guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. So now we're getting into the resurrection. So next week will be the resurrection. Any questions or comments? We'll just say, after all their efforts of putting that nice little seal on there and sitting there with that guard, the stone still rolled away. Huh?
As in the seal got broke.
The seal got broke. All them 2 by 6s and 2 by 4s and 4 by 4s and concrete and duct tape and drywall screws couldn't hold it.
And it still didn't void anything.
It still didn't void anything. Well, it did void one thing. It voided the self-righteous Pharisees. Anyway, yes.
Question, because my brain, I don't think it's brain right now. You got Mary Magdalene, and the other Mary.
Uh-huh.
That be Mary, the sister of Martha. The other Mary.
Maybe I'll have to check.
Yeah, because I don't think it would be his mother.
I don't think it's his mother, but I'll have to check. It was too many people named Mary back in that day.
Quite contrary.
Yeah. And in this case, the garden wasn't growing. Any other questions? Hi, Tammy. It's good to see you back among the living. Yeah. All right. God bless.